Um, First of all, who am I? I'm originally from Iceland, but I've lived most of my life in Sweden. Anna also met me in Australia when I lived there for a couple of years. Currently, I work at Avencia as the QA manager here. Previously, I was in Sydney working for Atlassian for the DevTools department, so Bamboo and Bitbucket. Before that, I was working at J-Way, a consultancy firm in Malmö, doing all kinds of custom solutions, mobile, enterprise, etc. I'm also part of the ORDEV program committee, so I get the privilege to choose the speakers that I want to have in Malmö for this awesome conference. So stay tuned in November for that. Also, I'm a tester, and while I don't really see myself as a tester nowadays, there's always this tester in me. However, I see the tester role differently than many people do nowadays, and this is going to show later on in my presentation, actually. First and foremost, about some context about my company, Avencia. It was founded in 1998. It's publicly noted on the Stockholm Nasdaq OMX exchange. We're about 220 experts in e-commerce, and we have offices in Lund, Helsingborg, Stockholm in Sweden, and then Copenhagen, Denmark, and also in the Cebu in Philippines. And actually, which is not noted here, we actually are starting an office in Chicago in the US, actually. So we do only e-commerce. And what does that mean? Because of the variety of listeners here, you might or might not recognize some of these brands. Basically, this is some of our customers. Naked is a fashion brand that is growing strongly. Probably you've heard of Toyota Material Handling and a couple others. Basically, we do 50-50 B2B and B2C customers in different kind of industries like fashion, sports and leisure, industrial services, and tools, and all kinds of things like that. But basically, the emphasis here is on e-commerce, right? And for even more context, one of our most famous sites is lyko.se. It's a Swedish makeup and makeup store. And well, they actually started out with hair. And we've won several awards with this site. And basically, what stands out with our sites is actually performance, or actually perceived performance. And it's not something that I will dig deeper into in this presentation, but I will probably do in the future when it comes to measuring performance. And it might not be the performance that you're actually used to measuring here. Also, some about the development context. Because we have the customers that we have, retail customers, we have a huge project focus. However, we also do some product thinking when it comes to packaging our solutions, because we use standard solutions that we build on top of in most of our projects, actually. So at the same time as we're doing projects for customers, we also try to package them into reusable components so that we synergize one project with the other. Only e-commerce sites. Yes, and with maturing teams. What does that mean? Well, we've grown a lot the last 2 years, which means that we have gotten a lot of new people in that don't know the packaged solutions that we've been building. And it also means that we have a lot of focus on knowledge sharing and getting all the new people up to speed. Short about the tech, we build on top of Episerver, CMS, and Commerce. We use in River PIM, usually .NET backends and React.js frontends. A lot of our solutions is integration heavy, which means that, well, basically every retail company has an backend ERP system where they want their transactions to go, and they've got loyalty systems, and they've got gift card systems, and all kinds of these systems that need to be tied together into their new e-commerce solution. And we deploy most of our stuff to Azure for scalability and things like that. And with that, I'm running this small quality team, and this is actually our vision of what we want to achieve is actually to empower developers to confidently test by providing training tools and environments. We want to make it easier for them to test and deliver with high quality. We keep tabs on the team's output and identify process improvements and things like that. We also try to foresee and prevent problems before they actually become issues to be handled. And in short, that really means that we want to enable project teams to deliver great and high quality software at speed. That's a hard task, right? Especially since we're not testers, right? And that's what we're going to get into. First, we're going to go back to basics. And while I think that many of presentations in conferences go back to the basics, I sometimes feel like we haven't gotten through the basics yet. But basically, what is quality? Quality to our customers, they do mean quite different things, actually. When I ask people what quality is, our developers and our development teams, they tend to say, yeah, well, we shouldn't create any bugs, shouldn't crash, we should be able to make purchases on our e-commerce websites. And it basically means different things to different people. And while this design of this spoon that I'm showing you here is a really nice spoon, it's probably unusable as a spoon, right? So this is where high quality needs to be aligned between stakeholders, like the designer that made the spoon, or the developer whose own quality goal is that it shouldn't crash, things like that. And I like to move it up a little bit, because how do you create quality? Basically, this is what I tell all our development teams. Quality cannot be tested into a product. It has to be built into it. It does align with the team being responsible for the quality that they create, right? I tend to be on the opinion of if a developer doesn't want to test their stuff or doesn't want to take responsibility of what they've created, they're probably not being responsible in their role as developers as well, right? And this is a thing that I usually get questions on after this session, and I'll be happy to discuss this more. But basically, I think the team is responsible for quality, thus need to be responsible for the testing of it as well. And so what is quality then? Yeah, well, I said that there is different stakeholders have different view of things. But probably you should align a little bit on what is the most important, right? So my favorite analogy for what quality is actually this pyramid. So there are a lot of pyramids going on in the software industry, and this is one of them. But it's actually my favorite one. It was created by Gojko Adzic in 2012 to basically explain what quality is on different levels. It's a pyramid. It's based on Maslow's pyramid of needs. So to be able to use or to before you're able to use something on the top, you need to satisfy the needs on the bottom, right? So basically, your software, so because this is software quality, basically your software needs to be deployable and functionally okay before you can actually, look at anything else, right? And so basically, if you build some software and you cannot run it on a server, then it's actually quite useless. So functionally okay also means, well, it does things. And these things don't necessarily need to be good, but it's a basis of quality, right? And then the next step up, when it's functional okay and deployable, it needs to be performant and secure. So performant enough so that it can satisfy the needs of the X users that are going to use it at the same time, or performant enough for the chip not to burn itself, or things like that. Performant for what it needs to do, and secure enough so that it, if it's a website, secure enough so that it doesn't get hacked. And not until those needs are satisfied, you can actually look at is it usable? So can you use it to something? And after that, it's useful. That means that the software that you've built does bring the expected value to a user. And on the top is successfulness. So successfulness, if you talk to people about successfulness, it can be hard to grasp. However, it's actually easier than you think. Because successfulness in my business, in e-commerce, means conversion rates, or the average order value, or relevant traffic, for example. Those are usually the key KPIs of an e-commerce site. While for other types of software, it might be the monthly active users or things like that. And what I tend to do in my teams is actually define the level of functionally okay and deployable, so that we get, like, what you want is actually a slice of this pyramid, a well-weighted slice of this pyramid. Because otherwise, what I've seen in projects that have a lot of testers, they usually tend to focus on the bottom part. So basically, looking at functionality, it's functionally okay, and might forget to look at the performance or the usefulness of the application. And this is where the team needs to help each other out, because when you develop a new functionality, it's probably good that that functionality was derived from some kind of successfulness KPI. So basically, if you want to add a button to add more things to the cart on an e-commerce site, you're probably trying to improve your average order value. And if you're trying to improve your average order value, but you put that button in completely the wrong spot, so it's not useful or usable, then you're not really succeeding. And by that, you're actually not. It doesn't matter if it's that button is functional or not. So basically, I had the privilege in one team to be part of a greenfield project team where we actually set up monitoring for all of these levels, and that meant that we were able to measure a new functionality and how that affected the successfulness of the app, which was really cool. And we actually managed to get to a state where the performance could be tweaked so this usefulness would get better or worse. And basically it did affect the successfulness as well, because switching on more performance meant it costed us more money in the cloud, right? Yeah. So basically, this is a way I want to talk about quality, and it does affect many more roles than the actual tester here, because successfulness metrics is usually something that the business cares a lot about. So how do you achieve high quality? Basically, with the model that I just showed, what you really only need to do is define what quality to reach for. You measure the right thing. You improve the areas you need. And that's dead simple, right? And this is where software development is hard. There are a couple of categories of activities that I tend to push people to do, or I tend to get people to do on successful teams to achieve high quality. And basically, it depends on the type of quality that you're after, really. So, for example, for functionally okay, you want to probably focus on prevention and to avoid creating faulty functionality in the first place. I have an activity that I call QA kickoffs that we do in our teams. Basically, brainstorm about risks of a story, and it does include both functionality-wise and performance-wise and things like that as well. So basically, avoiding to create bugs. Test automation, you all know it. It's good for regression coverage of different levels. And end-to-end performance, etc. Static analysis is a very code-centric thing. You can probably doing web accessibility tests like Michael just showed you before is also a type of analysis tool that you can use. Manual testing, so system level examination, it can be risk-based scenarios and things like that. Monitoring like tracking your service. It is a way for you to know how your system is doing. Basically, you're listening on the pulse of the system and see, does it work as I'm expecting it in production. Its performance or uptime, for example. Or you can do some business monitoring, which is usually tied to your success metrics. You can do A/B testing to reach better conversion rates and SEO and things like that. So all of these things, these activities are things that you can do to achieve higher quality, right? And it basically it's dependent on the quality that you're aiming for, which activities that you want to do, right? And then, well, this thing with software delivery, there are needs to constantly keep your high quality up, but at the same time you want to move faster, or else you will be eaten by your competitors. And that you do by keeping customers happy And at the same time, you want to keep your developers productive and happy, right? And so there are a lot of challenges here. And one of the things that has come in recent years to help with high quality and move faster, it is the word DevOps. There are a lot of definitions of DevOps, and I'm going to mention a couple of them and what they include, and then I'm going to actually be more concrete with what we've done at Evensia with regards to DevOps to get higher quality. So DevOps, the meaning of DevOps, according to Wikipedia, it's a software engineering culture and practice that aims at unifying software development and software operation. The main characteristic of DevOps movement is to strongly advocate automation and monitoring at all steps of software construction, from integration, testing, releasing, to deployment and infrastructure management. DevOps aims at shorter development cycles, increased deployment frequency, and more dependable releases in close alignment with business objectives. So this definition, when thinking about it, it actually is funny to think of things like, where do testers fit in DevOps, or how will my team go DevOps, or whatever DevOps, how does DevOps fit in my organization? And for me, this is actually just a healthy view of things. Strongly advocate automation in all steps of software construction. So basically, you want to make things faster all the way through the life cycle of the software, right? And that's basically what it is. And that's also what the DevOps report from Puppet Labs says. It's from 2015, so it's got a couple of years, but basically it's about high-performing IT organizations. They are faster, they deploy more frequently, they have shorter lead times, they've got fewer failures, and whenever they have failures, they recover faster. And so basically, run fast and break things, it's encapsulated in this DevOps thing. And this is where testers start thinking about, well, we don't want to break things. We want to test it all the way through, test it till time freezes, right? But no, we want to build fast things, but in a safe way. And safe might mean fast as well, but we need safeguards. There are a couple of core values of DevOps. Basically, this is the CAMs. Culture. So culture is important because you want to make sure that everyone involved it takes a part. And this is where, because the people is the center of the whole transformation. And the culture part of DevOps says that we want people over process over tools. Basically, we want people to decide on the process and change the process and then use tools to aid them, right? But at the center is people. One of the core values is also automation. So basically, it's encapsulated in this notion of infrastructure as code. And so basically, if you do something more than once manually, you should probably automate it. An example of that is test environments. If you spend some time setting up a test environment, and then it breaks a couple of days later, and then you spend some time again setting it up. And so basically, if you're setting up any test environment more than once manually, you should probably automate the whole thing, or at least parts of it, as much as possible. And it's also a thing with there's a notion within the DevOps that to treat your servers as not as pets but as cattle. So basically, if a server is not feeling well, you shoot it and bring up a new one, right? And you don't take care of it like a pet, right? Measurement, you measure everything, and why is that? Well, to continuously improve, you also need to continuously measure what you're improving so that you actually know that you've improved, right? So basically, I learned in my time at Atlassian that we were not doing any changes to anything, any process or anything, without first making a benchmark on how are we doing now, then we make a change, and then how are we doing after. Because otherwise, we can't actually know if we made a significant difference. Sharing is part of the DevOps culture. So basically, collaboration, feedback, creating knowledge bases for the whole team, sharing what you learned the last week through any means in the team, basically. Because a team that is autonomous, they will learn from each other, and they will also become a really fast pacing team. There are a couple of methodologies. This is where I've taken this from the DevOps Foundations in LinkedIn, and so they basically had the methodologies also being the culture. So people over process over tools. Another methodology is continuous delivery. This is where there are a lot of continuous deployment, continuous delivery, continuous integration, etc. Right? But continuous delivery here means that you're actually delivering at a fast pace, or as fast as the business can handle it and want it, right? So basically, the difference between continuous delivery and continuous deployment is that continuous deployment, if you have that in place, you're able to do continuous delivery, because continuous delivery is when you deploy to production when the business wants it to. So if the business can't handle downtime during the daytime, you will only do continuous deployment during nighttime, right? Lean management, so basically managing teams without waste, visible ops, change control, and infrastructure as code. As I just mentioned, if you're setting up something more than once, you should probably automate it. Another reference that I want to talk about is Tanya Kravtsov. She has done an excellent presentation on 10 steps to continuous integration, testing, and delivery. Basically, these are the 10 steps that she mentions in her presentation. First, you identify your bottlenecks, comes from Lean. You set up common repository for artifacts so that everyone knows where artifacts are stored. You automate your build and deploy pipeline. You collect code quality metrics so that you know if you're improving or getting worse. You automate your environments. You automate your testing. You automate your test data management, your test analysis and reporting. You make sure that you gather and listen to continuous feedback from your users, from the system, from whoever. And then obviously you need to manage unrealistic expectations. So basically, if you tell your manager, we're going to implement DevOps and it's all going to be awesome, you need to make sure that the expectations are actually in line with what you can achieve here, right? Of these bullet points, yeah, well, I would say half of them mention automation, right? A big part of the DevOps movement is automate, automate, automate. And not necessarily only automation, but automate as much as possible, as much as you need to be able to move as fast as you need, right? Right. And then if you've looked at DevOps and read about DevOps, you've probably seen something like this as well. So this is about the continuous loop of DevOps. You plan, you build, you do continuous integration, you deploy, you operate, and you take in continuous feedback, and then you plan again. And there's no real purpose of this slide more than that I really like how it shows the plethora of tools that you can employ when you're doing your DevOps implementation. And this is an important part of understanding that to do DevOps well, you probably need some tooling. You probably need some tooling to automate. You need some visualization tools. You need some planning tools and operations tools, etc. Right? But I think the most important part here is whenever you introduce a new tool to your process or your team, it is really important to have a strategy and plan for it. Unless you do, you won't get any value from it. So basically the same thing as I mentioned before. What does it actually improve, measure, and track? So basically, if you're introducing a new tool, what do we want to improve on? What efficiency are we aiming for? What fastness does this tool help us with? Measure and track. And then you obviously need to see what the impact the tool has. So what changes in the development flow will it actually require? How will it look in our delivery pipeline? How will we handle the results? And this is an important one as well. I worked with a customer recently, and they wanted me to help them set up a new static analysis tool. And I asked them, why do you really want to do this? Are you going to handle the results? And basically, this customer, he was just like, well, I just want to set it up and work with it, right? And so it turns out that there were some backing investors asking him about this tool, but they did not have any plan for it. And basically, unless you plan for fixing any of the results out of it, this new static analysis tool wouldn't give you anything, because as I mentioned before, you need to build quality in. If you only test and don't do anything with that information, then that is waste, right? You've wasted the effort of getting that tool in the first place. Yes, quality has to be actively built into the product. It will not come by itself. So coming back to the quality goals. What are the quality goals of my organization, and what do I want to be better at? This is where your company might say, our users are complaining about the usefulness of they're not getting the value that they want out of our app, so they're leaving, or it's hard to grasp how to do things, then it's not usable enough, or our website keeps crashing and it's not stable enough. Then that's probably where you want to start with improving your quality. So all this talk about quality and DevOps, how does it fit together? I'm going to tell you about DevOps at Avencia. I joined this company a year and a half ago, and I noticed that none of the developers or development teams really were talking about DevOps at all. We were running some sites, and there was continuous work on those sites and doing maintenance development, and we were handling incidents and that, but nothing really, struck me as a very structured way of working here. So we have this center of excellence. So that means basically we have a center of excellence with competence groups. Competence groups have basically a budget to improve themselves or improve the company or improve whatever area is the appropriate one. I'm driving the DevOps and QA competence group. And what did that give me? Well, that gave me the opportunity to involve people that seemed interested in the areas that I wanted us to improve on. So basically, I sent out an invitation for a big meeting on DevOps in particular, and we did a workshop. And we did a workshop on what are the things that we are not doing very well in our projects. I did give some context into I wanted us to focus on DevOpsy things, but it actually, once I got everyone in the room, I didn't focus the discussions in any of those areas. Basically, I had 15 to 20 people in the room. We brainstormed some things that we wanted to improve, and these are actually the areas that we identified. Basically, we had problems with environments not being similar enough between the projects, or brittle or not available, and things like that. We also discussed about test automation. Basically, we aren't doing that well on test automation, which means that we are having regressions in every now and then, and incidents because of not having any regression suites. Also the monitoring part. So even though we have some sites that we're running in production, we don't do enough monitoring, and we don't know actually before the customers call us that the site is down. And so basically, we created 3 working groups where of developers, with one champion in each group, driving these initiatives. So these are basically our DevOps initiatives. And so what does environments mean? Well, we always have some development environments. We have test environment, system integration, UAT, staging, production, and different projects do call them differently. So there are a couple of challenges that we have. Basically, one thing was deployment schedules. So the whole scheduling part of things depends on our customer, right? So certain customers we have in Sweden, we can do it during night, but other customers are worldwide, so we don't have good deployment schedules. And this was creating problems with regards to the teams that were doing the work and the customers not understanding why do we need certain deployment schedules. Also, environment availability and quality. Some of our customers, because they're retail clients, they don't have very much understanding of software development. So why do we need to pay for a test environment? And why do you need to work on that test environment? Why do we need to maintain it? Things like that. As well as getting agreements between parties on those environments, and then we talked about build and deploy strategies, and they differ across our projects. Even though we have very similar projects and we have similar basically tech, we were doing things very differently in different projects. So one of the things that this working group got was actually, well, we need to align somehow. We need to create platform and strategies for different the different platforms that we're deploying to. So on-premise or Azure or whatever. But this is kind of a big task, right? So imagine 5 developers getting the whole problem of we need to structure our test environments. This is, I mean, any testers out here listening to me now will understand this, challenge. And basically, we wanted to start small. So basically, we started by adapting some of the convenience scripts from different projects to a common repo. And that way, we could share more between the projects. I mean, the developers were getting used to sharing, packages between projects, but this thing with utility scripts and scripts to set up things and things like that, going infrastructure as code was actually a new thing. It also caused the developers to understand that this was a new behavior that they need to employ. So basically, if I do something more than once, it should be automated. And if you haven't had this chain of thought before, it is a bit of a change in behaviors. The same goes with the test automation group. So basically, I showed them this random test automation pyramid that I took off the internet somewhere, and I showed them this is basically what we want to aim for. We need to have more unit testing. We need to have more API level integration tests. We need some GUI tests, and we need to automate our performance testing and security testing. And this is the vision. But like giving a group of people the task of make sure that we automate more, that's a tough task. So also here we want to start small. So basically, some of the people that were in this group were interested in test automation, and we tried to limit the different levels to what is the initiative on this level, and what is the initiative on that level, and try one of the levels and implement some of the first checks. And because we have many different projects, and they have similar code bases and similar setups, we are actually able to share that test automation a little bit more than you would in companies where you wouldn't have the same types of websites. And this also caused a difference in behavior. So basically, when we're thinking about a user story in a QA kickoff, we should also obviously think about what cases do we need to automate here. So basically, which risks do we really want to cover by creating solid test automation for regressions? And similarly with monitoring, we had a couple of we have a bunch of different monitoring tools: Raygun, New Relic, APICAP, Pingdom, Splunk, and basically we needed this team to collate and to take ownership of the monitoring situation, create similar strategies for monitoring in our teams, make sure that we monitor the right things in all the different projects. And just like with the other teams, we obviously need to start small, right? So the first question was actually, does every team have a TV or monitor so that you can actually show the dashboards of the clients? And then we put uptime checks for all our production sites. Some of them did have uptime checks and some didn't. Also, we decided that we would start creating standard packages for monitoring code. So just like any of the functionality that we would package, we would also package the monitoring code. And basically, this triggered the discussions about how if one of our production sites alarm, or if we see an anomaly on our site, how are we going to act? And this actually has created a very healthy behavior on discussing incident management and how do we communicate within the team or with the customers if something happens. Also, the question on if a certain feature is deployed to production, how do I actually know that it works? I mean, previously, you might not have added monitoring specifically for a specific feature, but making sure that it gave some indication and you'd added those checks to a dashboard meant that you could actually see your new feature in action. And I think this is, the most important point in my presentation is that all of these things, all of these initiatives that you can do in your company, they all need to start small. And basically what I want to end up with is like doing these initiatives. I took the word DevOps because it wasn't being used within Avencia. I packaged some of my ideas of things that we need to do into this. We did workshops so that the developers that were included in the initiatives, they felt really that they were responsible for the outcomes of those workshops. They feel that they own quality in a much greater way, and they are basically our quality champions going forward in the company. And so with that, I mean, these whole initiatives, do trigger all the developers to have different discussions with their peers. They are more aware of quality. They know what the quality that we're reaching for is. And basically, this will drive our quality to go better and higher and achieve world-class quality. Excellent. Thank you very much for listening.